Okay, so we will make a start then. So again, thanks everybody for being here today. I appreciate how busy everybody is. Today's session, we're going to be looking at the role of Keynote, specifically within use in early years practice. And we're going to be looking at it beyond the presentation tool. I'll briefly introduce who I am. I don't want to take up too much time on this. I am Matt Pullen. I'm an Apple Professional Learning Specialist. I'm also a senior lecturer at the University of South Wales, where I teach our future teachers in the use of technology and how it can support teaching and learning as well. I actually, by profession, was a secondary school PE teacher for 10 years of my life, but decided that that was far too energetic for me. So took on a role in higher education, which was a little bit more in keeping with my physique, I suppose, as I'm getting older, and really just looking at pedagogy behind the role of technology, and not so much that specific use in certain subjects. So hopefully that gives a little bit of context. You can follow me on Twitter. I've added in more numbers there for some reason than it actually is. It should just be 6453. I'm not sure why I've added in another set of numbers after it, but 6453. But happy to engage on Twitter if people want to pick up things afterwards. Here's our brief agenda for this session this afternoon. We're going to just take a look at the basics of Keynote. So again, I'm sure people have used Keynote before, but just to clarify, I'm going to go over some of those basics, just so everyone knows where we're looking at different times. I'm going to look at some ideas around drawing in Keynote, and using some of those as very, very simple activities that you can do with your learners. We're then going to look at animation and storytelling and how that can be something that you can do. And then something I know that Lindsay's been picking up on quite a lot recently around the idea of using Keynote, again, for very different uses. I'm going to look at around using it to create templates for students to work within. Again, not necessarily as a presentation tool, but for very different uses. Like I said, please do ask questions and ask throughout. As interactive as we can make this, the better, so that we're really meeting the needs of everybody within the call. So like I said, we're going to start off just with the basics of Keynote, just so everybody knows where things are, what the things do on the screen, just so it makes it a little bit easier as we go through. So this is just a screenshot of my device. There are very, very simple tools. If you're used to using something like PowerPoint kind of exposes all of the editing and formatting tools to you across the top of the bar, whereas Keynote kind of hides it in some simplistic tools. And if you also use Pages or Numbers, you'll notice that it looks exactly the same. It's just a slightly different color. So there are lots of similarities, which makes it a lot easier for both the practitioner in using the tools, but equally for the students on the other end, because it's a familiar kind of interface that they're using. If I jump out then for a second, we'll just go through the basics of this. When we want to add anything new onto our page, and if I just jump into a brand new clean slide, if I want to add anything new, the plus icon is where I go for that. So if I tap on the plus, we can add in a whole range of media into onto our slide. We can add in photos or videos. That's going to open my camera roll on my device. So anything that I've taken a photo of or recorded as video can be added directly into the slide. Now, where this is very, very useful within Keynote is Keynote groups that information together. Without getting too technical to you, what PowerPoint does when you export PowerPoint is it strips the video elements, the media elements, from the text elements, and it actually saves them as two separate things. That means that when the end user uses it, sometimes they don't come back together in the way that you were hoping to. Keynote doesn't do that, it stores it as one file. So it's just useful for you to know, because obviously the end user is the people we think about. The next thing to focus on is the camera. So directly within Keynote, we can take photos or video of things. Now, again, from an early years point of view, this is beneficial because it means the students don't have to go to a different app to add something in. So if I tapped on the camera now, you'll see that it opens up my camera. So there's nothing exciting to look at. I'm at my desk. But if I take a photo and then just tap on Use Photo, within 2 taps, I've added in some content to a slide. So again, from an early years student point of view, there's no need to come out of an app, go into something else, save it somewhere, and then go back into it. It's a couple of taps. And equally, you can add video into that. We can also record audio, and I think for early years students, this is a really powerful thing. And we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about storytelling. But the fact that we can just simply, again, tap on record audio, record our voice, and you'll see that the sound bar moves across the bottom when I tap stop and insert. So again, just a couple of taps. We've got that audio recording that's documented on our screen. And again, I'm sure lots of you now are starting to think of how powerful that can be when working with early years children, because they do have lots of thought, but they might not necessarily have that ability to transcribe that down onto paper, etc. But we want to be able to capture those things. And again, we'll talk about the how we can do that and where we would do that a little bit later. The next one is a web video. Just to highlight what this is, basically it's the ability to embed a YouTube link directly into a presentation. So as opposed to it being a hyperlink that takes students out of the presentation, the video would play directly in the presentation. Now, again, it seems like a minor thing to highlight, but actually having students stay within something within Keynote is going to be more powerful than allowing them to kind of tap on something which takes them to another app, and they might then lose where they are, lose that kind of element of flow. So just an example, if I just tap on this, you'll see it brings up the option to add in a URL. If I jump very quickly to YouTube, just as an example, and find a video, seems like shameless plugging at the moment, but if I just choose one of my videos I've created, if I take that as a video, you'll see what I mean in terms of how it sits within that slide. So just copy and paste that into here. When I insert that, what you'll see is that video sits there, but without all of the YouTube stuff around the side, which I think is quite powerful. And again, if you think about that from that student point of view, if I ask them to go to YouTube, so let's jump into YouTube now. If I tap on play, what we have on the screen, you can make as many videos apologies for the sound, just wait for that to stop. What they're also exposed to as well as the video is all of this stuff on the side. And this is the stuff we don't want them to really go into, because some of it might not be appropriate, but equally it's a trap that they might end up getting distracted. So by embedding it into a presentation, it means that you're focusing them on the content. So again, it's a minor thing, but actually can be a very useful kind of teaching and learning support thing for your students going forward. You can equally add in an image gallery, fundamentally as a slideshow of your pictures. So rather than having numerous slides with pictures on, you can go to image gallery. And this is great for like a how-to process, teaching students how to tie a shoelace, put on a coat, line up at the door, the ordering of things. If I tap on the plus within this, you'll see it gives me the option to choose photos. Then they're open my camera roll, and then it could be just a case of step-by-step instructions for something. So just looking back, I'm just going to use the cobwebs as an example. I select the pictures that I want to select, and then when I add those pictures, instead of them being all on the page at one time, it now adds them in one after the other. So I get this bar on the side. So where that's useful, and again, I'm going to open this up to discussion in a second, where that's useful is down the bottom. It could just say step 1, step 2, step 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4. The images of a process, and then you could have a video over here explaining something that you want the students to do. But what it means is it keeps the focus on the step, as opposed to it being the cognitive overload of having all of the steps on the page for that student to view at any one time. So that's where that's quite useful. And then the final one, just to show you within media, is the drawing tool, which we'll look at in more detail in a second. But the fact that we then have the ability to have these drawing tools appear on the screen. Now, I'm using an Apple Pencil. You can use a finger, you can use a stylus pen, but we do have access to be able to draw, write, make marks fundamentally on that page as well. So I'm going to pause there for a second, because there's kind of a lot that I've thrown at you in that quick sense. But really just to reflect on any thoughts or ideas from anybody that have just kind of occurred to you as you've seen the range of things that you can add in, how that might be appropriate for your learners in the classroom. And again, feel free to just drop it in the chat window or come off mute if people are happy to share live.
I'm glad that you mentioned the image gallery, because I think sometimes with putting lots of images in Seesaw, the children don't realize that they have additional pages to scroll through. Whereas if it was something in Keynote, if it's in this little image gallery, you could easily just draw an arrow to draw their attention to, oh, push this button and you can see more in there. And I know that some of our teachers, especially in our pre-K, have made some great clips videos that would be, you know, outlining a process, and that could be supported by something like the image gallery.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, really good. Excellent. I'm not going to hold people hostage to have to come off mute, by the way. I'm not going to make people share if they're not wanting to. So we'll carry on that. Again, within Plus, then, these are the things that you can add in from a media point of view. You also then have this whole library full of shapes, etc., that you can use, and they are all sectioned across the top into some kind of rough order of things. So transport, for example, activities that you might do, places, people, etc. That's a really, really useful tool if you're building something, as well as if children are trying to find something to build, because again, you've got that visual representation of something they might look for. And again, we're going to look at this in more detail. I'm just kind of showing you that it's there. Equally, though, if I'm looking for something specific, useful to highlight that we do have this search tool. So if I wanted to look for something, if I wanted to find a pencil, if I just search for that, it's going to find that shape for you as well. So again, just a really useful tool. And just really to highlight whether you would use this in early years with your younger learners, you can also have interactive tools as well, so graphs and charts, etc. So just to highlight that they exist within this for you to use, but not necessarily, you might not necessarily use these from a student build point of view, although there are some great uses of being able to do things like quizzes, self kind of managed quizzes that you can do within that. Second button that you really need to know then is the format button, and this is the one that you're probably more familiar with when you're doing things in other programs, and that is, if I've got anything on the page, I can use that to edit it. So if I just jump back to a page with some text on it, if I tap on the text and go to the paintbrush, it gives me those familiar formatting tools that you would be used to using in other programs. So I can change the font, the size, the color, etc. And there's lots and lots of things in here that you can really personalize the things that you're working with, including, and this one is going to be important as we work later, the arrangement of those things. So because we're thinking about this from a design point of view, as we start to layer shapes or images, etc., it's important to know that if something disappears, it's probably because it needs to be arranged slightly differently. Again, I'm highlighting now really where it exists. We'll talk about it in more detail, and certainly when you have a play around with those things in some of the later activities. The last one to highlight that is of use to you is this 3 dots here. This is where any other options exist. There's lots in here that you will probably never really need to focus on, like setting passwords, changing languages of the device, etc. But something in here which is going to be of use to you, certainly later, is to animate things. There are a couple of ways to find animation on the device. This is probably the quickest way to know where it always will appear. So 3 dots and then animate. The other thing to highlight is the ability to export things that you create in a variety of formats as well. So we'll talk about this later when we look at animation, but we do have the option to export what we create as a video. Now this can be quite useful for the end user as well. If I export it as a Keynote, they might not know to click through slides, etc. If you've created something which models learning, you can export it as a video, which means if you're using Seesaw, you can just upload that as a video, and then the students will just have that play for them on the screen. Again, it will become more clear when we actually look at some of the animation things and some of the options. So again, any questions on that so far? Just the basics, just what the buttons do. Hopefully that's just going to help us as we move forward with some of the more hands-on sections. So all looks good so far. Brilliant. So we're going to be doing some activities now. So hopefully you've got your iPads with you and you can take have a go at playing with some of these. We're going to look at some just basic things around drawing and shapes. So again, Keynote as a tool to just embrace the idea of being able to do drawing, to be able to do some manipulation of shapes, to get familiar with some of the things. This first activity we're going to look at is tracing. I'll give you an example of an activity that I did with some students in a school way back when I was able to actually go into schools. And that was students were doing some self kind of portraits. They were talking about themselves, all about me. And as a result, the students were drawing, and this is what their drawings tended to look like. And that was a self-portrait that the children had drawn. And I asked them to kind of explain why and actually compare their pictures. And actually in their pictures, they all look the same. And the concerning thing that came out was some of the students saying, but I can't draw. I don't know how to draw. And this was children at the age of 4 telling me that they didn't know how to draw, which was upsetting to some extent because, you know, they're 4-year-olds and they should be able to express themselves. But what they were seeing was kind of a picture that probably didn't look exactly like them. So we played around with this a little bit and we gave them an opportunity to draw themselves. So what I said was, we're going to tap on the plus, and you're going to have a play with this in a second. I'm just going to delete this out. So I'm going to tap on the plus, and I'm going to go to the media section, and I'm going to go to the camera, and I'm going to turn the camera around, and I'm going to take a selfie. So here we go. And then I'm going to tap on use photo. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use that as a tracing tool. So a couple of things to do within this first, just to make it a little bit easier. If I tap on the paintbrush and go to style, I'm just going to make it slightly more opaque. It just makes the pen easier to show up. You don't have to do it, but it is an easier way to do this. I'm then going to tap on the pen tool, choose a black pen. So along the bottom here, I'm going to change the thickness of the pen, although that doesn't necessarily matter. And all I'm going to do is just trace around the outline of my face. And then I'm going to trace around my hairline, which there isn't much of it left. I might just kind of draw attention maybe to my ears, maybe some of the basic kind of shapes around my nose, add in my eyes. And I'm doing this quite quickly, so you would assume students would take a little bit more time and care over this. I'll add in my lips, and then maybe the fact that I have a beard, and I'll put something on there. So what we've now got, if I just tap on the screen and remove the picture, is a very quick, albeit quite scary, picture of myself. But actually, it's a little bit better than what potentially could just be this. So what I can see is actually, do you know what I can draw if I have some scaffolded support? So I'm going to stop talking now. Have a go. You don't have to share these, by the way, so you can feel free to have a play. Take a selfie. So we'll go back through those steps again. Tap on the plus, go to camera, turn your camera around to face yourself, and then pose for your camera. When you take the shot, you just tap use photo. And then once you've got the picture in place, again, like I said, you don't have to make it more opaque, but if you want to, you then use the paintbrush under style and then just change the opacity. And then it just gives you that option to obviously draw over it. And you're just kind of saying to the students, just what are the key features? We would look at eyes, we would look at nose, we would look at the lips, potentially the shape of the head and the hairline maybe. But again, because you've given the students the tools, what they'll see is as an outcome is that was what their drawing looked like before, but with just some scaffolding, they can make it look more real. Are you sharing that, Nancy?
Yeah, there's mine.
See, that's really good.
I like your little
My little top knot thing we've got going on here. Either the top knot or the extremely judgmental expression on my face at the moment.
I think the key thing is, and I'll be interested for your feedback on this as well, is when I was doing this with the students, was
Okay.
actually their feedback that they actually felt, oh, I can draw.
Sorry, I've got a question.
Please do, yes.
I think Ziska.
I'm
Are you there? You were there and then you cut out a little bit. What do people think about their students using this then? Do you feel this is something that's you know, quite easy for them to?
Yeah, I've got a question. I'm at a picture and now I want to draw on the picture. How what is the next step?
Okay, so I'll go through those steps again on mine so you can see. Right, so I'm going to go to the camera and I'll turn the camera around and take a photo.
I've got a selfie. Now I want to draw on it. What's the next step?
So the picture is on the screen like mine now, yes? And you've got the tools across the top. Then you tap on the plus, and then you've got drawing as the option here. That will bring up your drawing tools. And now you can draw. So just make sure that you've got one of the pens selected. So in this case, if I just turn it yellow, you can see I've got a pen selected here. And then it's just a case of just drawing over onto the screen. Does that answer the question?
I
really
like, sorry, go on, Annie.
So how do we get rid of our picture underneath? Take that away.
So what you need to do then is if I just tap back on the plus at the top, you'll see that I can select, you need to get rid of the drawing tools basically. Okay. Then I can select the picture and then you can either just move it to the side to just double check, you know, what it looks like. Or just if you tap on it, you can choose delete and that will get rid of it completely. I sometimes find it easier to just actually move the picture off of the white canvas because then you've got that comparison. So you can see what you've drawn, but then you can move it out of the way to see your picture.
I really like it because I'm not a good artist at all. So I've achieved something a bit better than I could normally, but it's hard with my finger.
Yes.
So all our kindergarten kids do have a not an Apple Pen but a stylus.
Yeah.
I don't have one at home.
It is easier with a stylus.
When I did it a little bit small, the picture was a bit small. It didn't really quite fill the slide. So next time I'd probably advise them to make it nice and almost fill the slide, because as I was trying to do eyes, my finger was covering it and it was a bit hit and miss.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, useful feedback.
Cool. Even I managed to do it. Can you just repeat?
Well
Sorry,
done,
how to move the picture from the background? I was trying to do it as you were saying, and I.
Yeah, absolutely, no problem. So here's the picture that I've got.
Right.
So, again, just make sure that you've got you're in the select mode and not in drawing mode. So you don't want to have the drawing tools here. Have it so that you can select the picture, which means you've got the blue dots around it. And then you can either just move it to the side, so just drag it across, or if you tap on it, you can delete it as well.
Yeah, all cool. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Now the second about this, because I'm not a good artist, and I've just discovered that using my finger, I've removed the photograph, and I'm still not a good artist.
I don't believe you for a second. I don't believe you for a second. I think the thing is what kind of alarmed me, should we say, in working with those 4-year-olds was the fact that they were making a decision on themselves at the age of 4 that they couldn't draw. And I say it now. I say I can't draw at the age of 42. I suppose that's just ingrained in me. But it worried me that a 4-year-old would say they couldn't draw. And actually, what was really lovely was, and I think a couple of you said it to yourselves, when you do it this way, you look at what you've drawn and think, no, actually, I can draw. And so then it kind of is that positivity, isn't it? So, Gary, I don't believe a word of it. I think you can draw. You've just gone shy on us. The same applies here. So I've got this picture, and I'm going to show you a different approach to doing this now. So I've got this picture of a penguin. And if I asked a student to draw a penguin, they might be quite challenged with that. But actually, in this case, the penguin is just a couple of block colours. So we're going to look at this slightly differently using a different tool. This tool down here, this is the pen or paint fill tool. And when I draw with this, it will fill it for me as well. So actually it makes this process really, really easy. So I'm going to choose the paint fill. I'm going to choose the black. And now all I'm going to do is actually just, by using 2 fingers, I can zoom into a certain section. And I'm just going to trace around the outline, roughly, it doesn't have to be perfect, of the black colours of the penguin. So I'll do this wing here. And I'm going to show you how to get the pictures in as well, because I think that's going to be a useful tool for you, because it's a time-saving thing. So let's just imagine that I've got those parts there, and then also the feet might be useful to just add in as well. And you'll see all I'm doing is just using the pen to go around the shapes. And now when I move that picture, it leaves me with this kind of quite nice pop arty kind of approach. And all I've done, like I said, if I show you it without the picture on top, is using that paint fill tool. As you draw a shape, you'll see the shading inside. It fills that color for you. So again, a really, really quick and easy way for just maybe students picking out something as simple as shapes in nature. So it could be a photograph of a building and they just color in the shapes, but it will color it and highlight it for them. Or in the same way as that, just kind of taking that picture, you know, and just taking out some of the key elements to it. I'm going to show you something here that makes this process really, really easy. I've got this picture of a penguin, which I've just taken from the internet. So I'm going to go to a new slide. And again, feel free to follow along with this. And I want to get a picture onto this Keynote deck from the internet. So I'm going to slide up slowly from the bottom of the screen, which is going to reveal my doc with the apps on it. So I've literally started off the screen here, dragged up about 1 centimeter, and you'll see that your doc appears. Within my doc, I have Safari, which is my web browser. I'm going to do the same thing here a little bit later. It's tap and hold. So you leave your finger on it, and then you'll see that after a moment, you can then drag the app. And you'll see I've got control of the app. If I take that to the side of the screen, my screen splits. And when I let go, I now have access to the Safari viewer. I'm going to search for a penguin. Obviously, it's just a Safari browser. You can search for anything you like. And I'm going to search for an image. And you'll see here's the picture that I actually chose. And I'm going to do the same process again. So you will probably want to practice this a couple of times. I'm going to tap and hold on the picture I want. And then you'll see that I can move that picture. So a couple of seconds, and then you'll see that you have it under your finger. Now, if I drag that across and let go, you'll see the green circle. I now have that picture on my slide. So it's that easy for you as a teacher to create a resource for a student. We'll talk about this a little bit later. Lindsay's already alluded to this in the chat window. That's how you can put together some pictures on a slide, asking students to then be able to use that. So take a moment, have a go. Again, if you need me to go through it again, more than happy to demonstrate how to do that again. But when we're working in this way, from a teacher creating resources point of view, it's a really, really quick and seamless kind of process of just dragging the things to where you want them to be used, rather than saving it to camera roll, opening your camera roll, finding the picture, adding the picture. That's 4 steps when actually this is just 1 drag step. So have a go, find a picture of something. Doesn't have to be a penguin. I've just tried to theme it today, along with the things that you might be doing in school. But you could find any animal or building.
Annie, did you have a question?
Yes, I was just wondering, I was looking down at my drawing and I missed the part where what you click on to bring up like Safari.
Yeah.
I saw everything else.
No problem. So along the bottom of the screen, I'm just going to go back to single view again. Along the bottom of the screen, I'm going to start sliding up. So if I show you on my device, if the wire goes far enough for me, start at the bottom and slide up, and you'll see the dock appear. And then I've tapped and held on the Safari icon until you can move it. So keep your finger on it the whole time. Then drag it to the edge of the screen until you see it split, and then let go. And then to get rid of it, there is a tiny kind of bar in between you'll see it highlighted here. When you don't want split screen anymore, just tap on that and you drag that across, and then that's how you get rid of split screen. Is that okay?
Great.
I'm tapping on the bottom, but it's not dragging. It's not coming up.
So which bit's not coming up? Sorry, is it the
tab at the bottom where I can get Safari?
So it's a slide up from the bottom. So if you start off the bottom of the screen and slide up slowly, it should reveal the doc.
What I've got now is comment and edit master slide has come up.
So make sure you start off the screen. So rather than being on the screen, start along the bezel of the screen.
Terry, if you've got the kids case on, you may have to take that plastic piece of the screen off if it's an issue with the case, because your finger has to start just below the iPad.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
This could take an hour.
She's got one of the military grade cases that we have for them.
Okay.
And again, I suppose this is probably not something you would be asking your learners to do. This is probably more from a teacher creation point of view to get things prepped for them. So, you know, students probably wouldn't need to go through the whole taking off the cases, etc.
I love it. It's so much easier than copy and paste all the time.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think it is. It's that just there's a couple of other really useful reasons as to why this is useful as well. One, it speeds things up for you, and two, the one problem that you tend to have on devices is that they get filled up very quickly with pictures, because you know it's an iPad and you can take photos very, very easily, and you can save pictures very easily. If I was to create this resource, doing it the other way by saving the photo to my camera roll and then adding it to Keynote, I then actually have two versions of that picture on my iPad. Now, although in the short term, that's not going to make much difference because it's only a couple of megabytes. If I did that over a period of time, I've basically taken up twice as much storage as I needed to. So just to highlight, this picture is not saved on the device in Photos. It's just within this Keynote deck. So if I delete it here, it's not on my device anymore, which actually just means you're kind of managing your storage a little bit as you go along. So you know, there's a couple of benefits to it, really.
I'm curious,
Lindsay, you'll be pleased to hear I now have a naked iPad, but I'll never get that case back on.
Well, you're in Florida, so there's not a lot I can do about that for you. Is there anyone want to share their little drawings, anything that they've come up with so we can see? I know Gary's itching to.
No, Gary's itching to. When you've got your image and you've still got your split screen, how do you get rid of your Google search, for instance, if you've used that on the other side?
Yeah, no problem. I'll just jump back into that just to show you again. So you should have something that looks similar to this. Can you see this little white icon directly in the middle of the two screens?
Oh, I've been using the one at the top. There's one on the left. Okay.
Yeah. If you drag that one to the side, that will then get rid of the split screen.
Thank you.
No problem.
Annie, let me see yours again.
I did something wrong. It's kind of my picture, and then I was drawing that.
Oh, and Sheila's done the penguin. Very nice, guys.
Once you've got the pictures up, if you want to add text boxes or text around them, how do you get to do that?
No, great question. I'm just going to show this. So again, if you go back to your plus icon at the top, in your shapes, I should have mentioned this before actually, at the very start of the shapes library, so if you move all the way across to the left, there is a text box here, but equally every single shape is actually a text box as well. So just to highlight this, I could drag in a text box and then write directly onto this. So this is a penguin, etc. But if I jump in and actually go to a shape, you know, I'll use a t-shirt as an example. If I double tap on the t-shirt, I can also type into that box as well. So that is a text box as well. So that's how you add in your text element to it. One other thing which is probably quite useful here to highlight, and you may or may not have seen this before, again, writing on a keyboard for early years students may be a challenge. It's obviously something that you no doubt work on with them, but equally they're not going to do a huge amount, and equally they might not know how to spell certain words. So something to highlight on your devices. If I bring up the virtual keyboard on my screen, to the left of the keyboard is a microphone icon. That's a dictation tool. So therefore students can just dictate into it. This is a t-shirt. So there we go. So again, just kind of different ways for students to access things. You know, I say this to my students all the time in university, that if they're ever teaching 4-year-olds about dinosaurs, don't for 1 second think you're the expert in the room. If you just give students the tools to be able to share their knowledge on dinosaurs, they could probably write essays on it, right? Because they just know everything. However, if you ask them to spell pterodactyl, chances are they're going to get it wrong. You ask them to say it and the device can spell it for them. Brilliant. Like, what a way for them to be able to see something visually that they know. It goes back to that kind of success thing, you know, show them that they are capable, and it gives them a real passion for learning. So awesome. So yeah, any other questions about that? So thanks for that question then about adding text alongside. That's a really, really useful one. Another thing to kind of highlight here is, now I've got my drawing of the penguin, I can now duplicate this penguin. So if I tap on it, that will give me the options to copy and paste. And now I can have a whole colony of penguins. I could also change the color of these penguins. I've seen teachers do this really, really nicely with, and I can never remember the artist's name, but if I say Campbell's soup, you'll get what I'm doing here.
Andy Warhol.
That's the fella. If I now tap on that shape and select it, so this tool here is like a cut and paste tool. If I draw around this penguin and then just choose a different color, you can then get really, really creative with your students, and they can start to sort of think about, you know, colors and patterns and repetition. There's so many things that I'm sure as teacher practitioners at this stage of learning, you'll see how this could be used in a lot more creative ways than me. But we can start to look at repetition and pattern, etc., in a more sort of playful way.
Matt, quick question. I know you're changing the fill color of the drawings. You can't fill it with an image, can you? Keynote, or none of them will allow us to do that just yet?
You can, but it's a bit of a workaround. Do you want me to show you how to do it?
This is more for me than anyone else.
So just as a quickest, whilst people are still sort of playing with their drawings and maybe making their Andy Warhol paintings, I'm going to show just another tip really, and that is if I open my Photos app, done the wrong way around, open Keynote and then open Photos. If I take any of my drawings here that I've done of the penguin, so I'm going to choose this one here. I'm going to tap and hold, same as I've done before. I'm going to drag this and drop it as a photo. So you'll see roughly over here, you can see the outline of the penguin. And if I drag and drop that back, that's actually created this as a picture. So that's not a drawing anymore, that's a picture. And with that, if I just get rid of my split screen, it gives you different properties basically. So if I go to the paintbrush now, I can actually replace that background with a different color. So if I go to, oh, well, it should be letting me change the color of it. Or maybe I've done it on the Mac before. Maybe that's why I can't see it. Sorry, Lindsay, I've let you down now. I thought you could.
Well, that's it. I'm leaving now.
Can I ask a question?
Please do, yes.
So probably for Lindsay, actually. So the children being encouraged to use Keynote, or is it just for the teachers to present things in Keynote?
No, so it's both. We had a go with kindergarten this week using Keynote, as I mentioned in the session this morning, for collaborative space for everyone to work together on a file. But absolutely, it can be for teachers to create resources, which, as Matt mentioned, you can make something in Keynote and then export it as a video. So for you, Caroline, if you wanted to animate how a flower could grow, you could do that in Keynote, export it as a little video and share that with students, you know, through Seesaw. So it's a powerful tool for you to create content, but then also for children to be able to work in Keynote as well. I know before Christmas, Gary and I with kindergarten, we were having a go of working with Kaleidoscope and Photo Booth and making ugly Christmas jumpers in Keynote, which was really, really fun for the kids. So I think the fact that we're looking at this one tool in particular, we're just really exploring the creative potential for you, but also for the kids.
Right, and Clips.
Lindsay, I've got a question.
Sorry, Caroline?
Clips does similar stuff, but this goes into it to another level.
Yes, so this allows you a bit more sort of hands-on free creation in that regard, whereas Clips is more of layering things on top of what's already been created.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm. There was another question?
I got a, yeah, it's Tori. I've colored in my penguin. I did the black thing and everything, but we had a little bit of a snag where as I got Safari up there, I got the penguins on the screen. I did it, but I don't know how I did it. I got rid of the Safari search bar, but I didn't have a little round symbol up. It just went, which was fine with me because at that time I went to the drawing tools and did my thing. But
so were you in this view? Is that what you're saying? How did you get rid of that? Was that the question?
no, I was in Safari over there, but not that. It was in that, yeah, and I couldn't get rid of it.
Yeah.
And
So
then when I got rid of it, the little dot didn't come back. It just poof, vanished.
yeah. So that bar, when you slide it all the way across, that's just gone then. So you would have to start the whole process again.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think maybe picking up on what Lindsay said before about the, who's doing this, is this students or teachers? As a teacher, I might create this as a resource. So I'm just going to select all of these penguins and I'm just going to paste them in. So we've got lots of versions. Now this is the teacher creating this, but actually what I don't want to do is have them in order. So I'm just going to put a few blue ones over here, a couple of orange ones here, and you can just duplicate this as many times as you want just by copy and pasting. And then I share this as a resource to the learners, and the resource that I'm asking the students to do is keep the pattern going. So, and again, I'm going to look at this in a second about in terms of creating like a template for students to use, but the idea is that the students are now using this to replicate the pattern. So they haven't had to go through everything to build it. That's you as the teacher. But from a student point of view, they're using it to replicate patterns. And yes, you could do this with squares and circles, etc. But if we're doing something around penguins, then why not talk about pattern, but use penguins as the impetus to it? So again, I'm sure you guys as practitioners can come up with a million fantastic ways to do it, just showing you that this is a tool that you could build it in. And it's just once you've got one thing, you just copy and paste those things to duplicate as many times as you need to. So hopefully that makes sense there. Again, just copy paste, layer things on top, and then students just use it as a drag and drop activity. So useful for them in that sense. Fab. Okay, we're going to move on to this one now. So this picture I shamelessly stole from Safari. If you go onto Safari and search for a penguin, you will see this picture is here. But it made me think actually about another aspect that children are learning, and that is identification and use of shapes. So the idea within this activity is, can you recreate this picture just using shapes? And we're not necessarily going to go into the complexities of all of the shapes. So like I said, within this there are loads of different ways you could do it. So just using the basic shapes on this page, create a penguin. So there's a couple of ways to do this. I'm probably starting with older children, but never underestimate what children can do. And in this way, we're just going to think, okay, well, the overall shape is kind of an oval. So I'm going to take that as a shape. And I'm just going to stretch it maybe a little bit and make it slightly bigger. So again, I'm just kind of using this kind of idea of matching what I can see on one side and recreating it. And again, feel free to kind of play along with this as well, as you can see the example on my screen. The next thing then is I'll notice that the white, this is a circle. So I can find a circle. I'm going to have to use the paintbrush to change the color of the circle. So I go to style, and I'm just going to change that to white, and I'm going to drag that in. And again, I'm just going to play around with size. So if I make that circle bigger, Again, I'm using the picture to the side as a template, trying to match it as best I can. I then notice the beak is a triangle. So again, I'll find a triangle, manipulate that triangle to make it face the right way. So this one is upside down. And again, I'll change the color. So you get the idea here. All I'm doing is just kind of playing with shapes to recreate a picture as an impetus to the students. And there we go. We're starting to kind of build this, our picture of this penguin, thinking about the shapes, identifying the shapes that are within the picture. So we've got the curved rectangles for feet. So again, I'll use this one. And I'll show you another way to do this, maybe with your younger learners as an entry point. But again, I wouldn't underestimate students. They're so fab at creating these things. But you'll see how we're starting to just use shapes, etc., to recreate. So again, have a little bit of a play. This penguin is a really, really good example because it's full of shapes that you can identify in here and then manipulate for yourself. But please do have a play. This is also where that arrange tool is very useful. So you can either start with the back shape, which in this case is the black body. But if I started with the white shape, when I then move the black shape over, it would probably hide everything. So if anything isn't seen, select the shape, and then you can use the arrange tool here, and you can move it back and forward. So example, if I added the black body in afterwards, it's actually hiding everything. So you would just paintbrush, arrange tool, and just drop that to the back so that it makes more sense. So again, have a play. It doesn't have to be a penguin if you don't want to. Feel free to try and create any other shaped animal. And then I'll talk about how I've used this actually with a reception class and some of the outcomes that came from it actually. Again, when you see what students are capable of doing, you actually really get impressed with the outcomes that they're capable of.
I think it's a matter of ownership and the fact that they are being taught how to create something with the tools, but it's completely their own creation. It means a lot more to them when they have a say and an input in something like that. So imagine if they all were working on a Keynote file to make a little character. You as the teacher export that character as an image, and that image can be used for storytelling, but it's their own little character that they've made, through a combination of shapes or adding in the drawing as well. It really becomes a lot more personal for them. And I think you guys saw when we did it with kindergarten this week, there were very quick changes that the kids were making to their drawings, like lightning quick decisions. Which you wouldn't necessarily get once something is committed, in paper and pencil. There's that reluctancy of wanting to change it, like the colors on there. Well, it's red now. I'm going to have to keep it as red. Whereas now they have that freedom to go ahead and make those split decisions, where maybe I actually want my sky to be green instead of blue, and I can do that, and it's not going to affect all the other elements of what I've put into this. So I think it provides more of that freedom for the kids. Yep.
Can you remind me where the shapes are?
Yeah, so plus icon along the top, and then you've got this square over the circle. So this was your media one where we were adding in photos. This one is your shapes. And we're just going to focus on the basic shapes. So just using these. But again, you know what students are like. They'll probably go in to look at some other things and get really creative. And that's a great thing, and we'll talk about that in a second, really, in terms of not isolating their creativity by restricting them to things. Actually, as soon as you open it up, it can actually unlock some fantastic things. And I'll give you the story now of doing this. So I didn't start with a defined shape. I was working with a reception class and we were looking at pets. And actually what I gave them, if I kind of model this to you now, was a blank slide. And I'd done no prep work with them. They'd never used Keynote before. But I gave them a blank slide with some shapes. And this literally was the design that I kind of gave them, was just some shapes on a page. And I just said to them, using these shapes, design a pet, whatever you want it to look like, just design a pet. So just think about, what shapes you've got and what would your pet look like. So this is what they had, and what was really, really interesting, and I'll try and replicate it, although the child who did it, I will not do him justice, but he created something that looked a little bit like this, manipulating the shapes. Again, I haven't done him justice. His picture looks so much better than mine, but looked something like this, and I assumed instantly that he had touched the shape in the wrong way and made the shape bigger, because you can see the back legs are wider than the front legs. So my adult interpretation was that he had manipulated it wrong. As he was moving it, he's done this and then didn't correct it and left it like that. When I asked him about his picture, he then went into this fantastic description saying he's got bigger legs at the back because he's really fast at running and he needs bigger muscles in order to run fast. Wow, right? That's a 5-year-old child completely blowing me away, because I just assumed he pushed the button wrong. But there was absolute rationale as to why he did that. So this is kind of the additional reason why technology is fantastic for certainly for this age learner, is I said to him, can we record that? So I tapped on the plus, I tapped on the media section and tapped on record audio, and I said, tell me about your pet. And all of the other learners wanted to do the same. And so an activity that I planned thinking they're capable of doing this turned into something that was so much richer, because it had their audio descriptions of their pets. They told me, you know, why they were that color, why they were that shape, why they were this. They gave them names, they gave them everything. And as a result, we had this slide with them talking about what they'd done, which can then easily be evidenced and utilized for future work, etc. So very, very powerful. And that was really just starting from just some random shapes on a page, but ended up being something very, very rich and meaningful in terms of learning. So, and that literally was a design piece. So
I think as well, you've hit on something really important there, Matt, which is the power and the ability of the technology to record exactly what a child is thinking. Because if we as adults translate that into text, we tend to take it out of its raw form. And we also strip away emotion. We also strip away enthusiasm of what they're thinking and how they're thinking it and what it means to them. Whereas if we can capture that right at the moment that it's happening through something like recording audio and put it with their design, it becomes so much more meaningful. And we as teachers can then glean so much more from that, rather than just reading it on a piece of paper in a portfolio. And vice versa, when we give feedback to children, I can very easily just type in, great job. But if I record my voice, they automatically connect that it's me saying it to them specifically. I can include their name and they can hear the tone and the emotion that's coming across of how I'm interpreting their work and what I'm thinking and feeling back to them, which they as in turn get so much more from that than just reading great job.
Yeah, and to that point, that doesn't change, by the way. I teach students in higher education, and they have openly said they'd much rather us give them verbal feedback than written feedback, because as you know, if you've ever received a text message from someone, you can't tell the intent of the words that are used. I use sarcasm quite a lot, and sarcasm doesn't translate very well in text messages. People just get offended by what I say rather than see that I was actually trying to be jovial in what I say. So, but it is that personal touch. And I think probably within the current climate of remote teaching, that is something, the disconnect that students have, is that they just want to hear your voice, right? You're their teacher, you're the person that they love to go and see every day. And that's the bit that you can easily replace for them in a functional way by giving them verbal feedback. So yes, works both ways. Students sharing their voice to you and you sharing your voice back. This is just another example, really. So this is what I mentioned before. And again, it goes to, I can't remember who it was that mentioned before about the idea of, is this for teachers or is this for students? This is the reverse of that. So what I've created here is a template. This is meant to look like an iceberg, by the way. And the idea here is the students have the shapes in advance. So they don't have to create the shapes. They just have to rearrange them to create something. So these are just all shapes that I've just created that the students would move to place in position. So this is teacher created slide that students just do a building process. And they might not do it. This is the fun thing. They might not do it in the way that it was intended. They might end up with things all over the place and get creative, but that's kind of the fun of allowing them to then add their voice to it. So it should look something like this, but you know what children are like. Their penguins might end up with ears, and these might be placed at the top. But that's fine, because then it's a talking point as to what they want to do. And in fact, they might not even make a penguin. They might make something completely different that you weren't thinking about. But that's great, right? That's their expression of what they're doing. The process here is the same as I've shown you before. So I've just created the shapes and put them here randomly, similar to the idea here of talking about this as a pattern type activity. And on this side, this is created just again using shapes. If I just go back a couple of steps on this, because I've locked this as a slide, it's just a blue rectangle with a darker blue rectangle here, and then in the shapes using, if I find it under the geometry ones, this shape here, and I've just layered them, and that's it. So it's just a design point of view for the teacher. It just, from my point of view, it made it look better if I'd represented that the penguin was living in a what looks like a cold environment. But
and how do you lock that background?
So what I've done, if I go through the whole stage, because it's useful to see the process, if I just again start with just a blank page. So I've added in my shape number 1, which is just the rectangle. So again, I'll do this very quickly, but you'll get the idea. So that's shape number 1. Add in shape number 2. Using that format button to just change the colors. So style, fill, lots of colors to choose from here. I'll just use a lighter one for the background and a slightly darker one for the foreground. Go back to that shape and then geometry and find the iceberg. Place that, make it a little bit bigger. And then what I've done here, as well as changing the color, is I've added a shadow to it. So in here you have shadow tools just to make it look like it might be floating. And then I've selected all of the shapes. Now there's a couple of ways to do this. You can just drag your finger. So start, you know, in the top left corner, drag your finger down like you would with a mouse. That's selected all of them. And then I'm going to group them together. So now it's one shape. So no matter where I move it, it's one shape. And then finally, paintbrush, and then lock. And now that can't be manipulated. And that's an important thing for the students, because if I just take these shapes over here, let's just copy them across onto this slide. As they're moving things around, if I unlock this, this tends to be what happens. I've moved the shape here and then I move the background, and now I don't really know what I'm doing, and then I've lost track. I'm frustrated it hasn't worked. So having that shape locked in the background means that they're only going to manipulate the shapes that you're asking them to manipulate. So again, just create the shape, paintbrush, and then under arrange, you'll have the option to lock the shape. It just means you can't move that background. It just comes a fixed background.
Thanks.
So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. Good. Hopefully we've got some ideas going. The next thing we're going to look at then is animation and storytelling. And within this, we're going to kind of pick up again on that point of using the record function for students, but also this ability to tell stories. So I'm sticking with my little penguin here, but now my penguin is doing something. It's going to be living somewhere. So what could we do to turn this into a story for the learners? Well, what I'm going to take is my penguin. Oh, I didn't finish my penguin, did I? It's going to have to be this bizarre interpretation of a penguin. And I'm going to put him just on a new slide. So start a new blank slide here. Paste my penguin. I'm also going to do the same process again. I'm going to group all of these things together so it becomes one shape. Okay. And my penguin is down here, or my version of a penguin is down here. Now, what I want to do is I want to tell a story about my penguin. So, and this is where children go to the nth degree. I'm going to actually say to them that add in some other elements. So, do you know what? The penguin might go on a walk one day and find a rabbit, and they might be going for a walk within the woods. So I might add some trees in. So this is just a design thing. Could be based on stories that you're reading. How could you recreate something like this? I've done this with a group of 6-year-olds, I think it was. They were reading a book called Bad Grandma. And so they built basically their versions of parts of the story. So again, making their interpretations of what they're reading, bringing it to life. But now I want my penguin to go on a journey. So I'm going to select my penguin. I'm going to tap on the 3 dots and I'm going to choose animate. Within this section, I then have some animation tools, and I'm going to choose this one that says add action. And I'm going to choose create path. Now I can draw a path by just selecting on the shape with my finger, and I can draw where my penguin goes for a walk one day. Very simple, just that'll do for now. Now when I tap play at the top and I tap the screen, my penguin goes for a walk. Okay, so really, really quick and simple animation. Now it might not be just the penguin moving, the rabbit might go for a walk as well. Oops. So add action, he might join the penguin on his walk, and then they might go to different places. That's the creativity, right? There's no point in me trying to recreate what a 4-year-old might do with this, because their thought process is fantastic, and there will be no kind of barriers to their thinking process. So now what we end up with is this kind of idea of these 2 animals going for a walk. But what I really want to know from the learner is, what are they thinking about in this story? So what I'm also going to add into this is that record audio. And I want them to just tell me the story. So tap on record. One day, the penguin went for a walk and he was out of his usual place, and he found a bunny, and he loved the bunny because it was fluffy and a different color to him. So they joined up together and went on a mystery adventure to the pyramids. I was trying to do my best impression of a 5-year-old's thinking process there, but I was probably missed the point completely. But what I've got is I've captured all of this on the slide. Now, there are some complexities to kind of adding all of this in, but if I just play the slide for a second, hopefully the sound comes through as well. So here's my penguin going off on his walk and then joined by the bunny rabbit. And then hopefully my voice should... One day, the penguin went for a walk and he was out of his usual place. So we've captured everything in together. Now, if you want to take that up a level and you want it to play all at the same time, so just to highlight that that is possible, if I go into animate again, once I've added all those elements in, the 3 bars at the top here allow me to actually have these all happen at the same time. So the rabbit is going to build with 1. The audio recording is going to start with build 1. And now when you play this through, and it is only a couple of taps to do that. One day, the penguin went for a walk and he was out of his usual place. I won't subject you to listening to my random story again, but you'll see that just a couple of taps now, the story goes with the animation. Again, doing this with a group of young learners, I did not appreciate the level of complexity that they would come up with and what it unlocks with certain learners. So I did have a student, I didn't know this at the time, I was working with a group of 4 students around a table. I showed them the basics. It must have taken me literally 30 seconds to show them it, and they were gone. They were just like, yep, we get it. Thanks. Stop talking now, teacher. We can do this. And the one teacher came over to me after observing it and asked me how much input I'd given to the one lad who was sat just to my left. And I said, no more than anyone else. He just quietly got on with it, pushed the buttons. And she said, because he's just come over to me and shown me what he's done. And it's amazing. He's got this really, really detailed story about, at this point, it was about bad grandma. And he built his bad grandma, and his bad grandma went on a walk, and he told this whole story. And I said, oh, that's brilliant. And she said, no, what you don't understand is he doesn't talk. He doesn't talk in class. He won't share anything. He's under speech and language therapy at the moment to support him with things. But actually, you've just given him something that he's expressed himself in a way that he hasn't expressed himself in the classroom at all. And so sometimes it's those things you don't know what the students are capable of doing until you almost give them the tool to do it. So I won't keep going on because I know people probably want to have a play and try things out, and I'm sure that people will have questions really about processes here. So I will mute myself for a second and have a play and see if you can get. It doesn't matter what you have moving around the screen, just have a play with some of those objects.
I have to say that was just delightful to see Kim's face just light up like that. Big old smile, eyes went wide, and I think she was enthralled in the story. I think she wants to know how it's going to end now.
First animation, please.
So when you've selected the object, so if I want to animate the bunny rabbit, if I then tap on the 3 dots, animate comes up here as an option. They will always be there. There is another way to do it. If I select and tap again on the object, animate also appears here. So there are a couple of ways to find it. When you're in that, if I just delete this one, just so I can go back to that start point, it's add action. And if you're used to using PowerPoint and the transitions and animations in PowerPoint, it's very similar to that. But what we're looking at is, rather than focusing on some of these, which again, if you let students play with it, they'll come up with some fantastic ideas of, you know, suns blinking and all that. But we're just looking at the create path animation. And then obviously just draw where you want that object to go.
Matt?
Yeah.
Just really quickly, I'm not sure if you're covering this or not in the next piece, but letter formation as an animation?
Yeah, so
okay.
I am, but it was kind of on the back of this within a different kind of project, but yeah, it's there. So like I said, I mean, there are lots of other things you can do with this. But I think it's one of those things where you give it to the hands of the students and they will be absolutely hooked on what the possible is, and then the limits, they will push the limits as to what they can potentially do with it. And like I said, I've seen some fantastic examples of storytelling being done with this. And again, what you're fundamentally doing is just allowing the students to have a different way to communicate thoughts and ideas. So it's equally as important to add in the audio recording, so that students get that opportunity to share their thoughts.
Matt, you said something very profound during the summer sessions that we attended. Matt was a keynote speaker at a conference that I attended during the summer, and it was all sort of relating to what we had learned about distance learning from COVID. And one of the things Matt had said that's really stuck with me is that creativity is now a new form of accessibility. And like you had said, you provided the opportunity for a nonverbal child to be able to have a voice and to actually show that he knows things, even if it's in a non-traditional way, simply by accessing these tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really powerful. I think that another thing that I'd love to go into today, but we don't have time, is I did a session for early years teachers doing outdoor learning. And I had a lot of skeptical teachers because they felt that actually when they did outdoor learning, that was a great opportunity for students to go outside and not be in front of technology. And actually what we did was integrated that when you use the camera on an iPad, it's actually a visual tool, because you see through the device, you see what's on the other side, but you get to capture it. And what came from that was one of the early years teachers saying that actually when you give the students a device, you get to see the world through their eyes. And that again is something that's really stuck with me about just really empowering students to capture things and show you what they see or show you what they think, by taking away the barrier of, you know, me either having to stand there and listen to them saying it and then record it for them, or them slowly be able to type something. You know, empowering students in that way can be very, very powerful. Just conscious of time, because there's one last section to look at, and this kind of comes back to what Lindsay mentioned then about letter formation and those sorts of things. What's useful for your learners is to have these templates in advance, and useful for you obviously in advance of being able to create something that students can use. And the way I've done this is using the master slides of a device. So to get to master slides, along the left-hand side of any of your slides, if you tap on any of them and then select it again, so tap once to select it, tap again to bring up your options, you'll see that you have this option to edit master slides. And within this, you then kind of have the same view, but what I'm going to do is create a set of slides that I can just easily replicate. I don't have to create, I don't have to copy and paste, they're always going to be there. So for example, I've created here a letter formation one, and you could do the entire alphabet. Here's that design page that I showed you before in terms of, you know, where the penguin might stand. This is just a very simple one which looks at, you know, I want you to draw within this place, but I want you to add an audio recording here. So I'm almost pinpointing to the students where I want them to document things. And you'll notice that the view that you're in here is just a slimmed down version of what you're working in terms of the creativity. So if I go to a blank slide, I can then start to design in here. So if I go to shapes, for example, let's just go back to those basic shapes at the start. Let's say that I want students to, you know, take a photo of something. I'm going to create a place which is obvious to them that I want them to create a photo. So I'll change the fill color to white. I've got an outline of black. I'm going to use the shapes to search for something which represents a picture. So it's visually telling them what I'm asking them to do, and add that in. So now to a learner, independently, they should know that I'm saying here, you know, you can add a photo into this. If I tap done on this now, the plus icon down the bottom here means I can add in additional slides, and you'll see that that slide then is something that's just created. So I can have as many of those on the page as I want to. Now, Lindsay yesterday did a session and has probably shared it with many of you about the idea of using this view, which is the light view. And you'll see now that that is a holding slide. So I would be able to see that for any of the students. So if you ignore like 1 to 22, because that's my presentation, if I add this letter formation in, and then if I just keep duplicating this lots and lots and lots, that's how quick it is for me to make a resource for 30 students. Now they all have that P because I want them to do letter formation. Individually, what the students can do on here with letter formation, combining with our animation that we looked at in the previous little activity, is I'm going to ask them to do letter formation with a penguin. In fact, let me take my penguin because he's been a star of the show so far. So we'll grab him, and we're going to do some kind of fine motor skills letter formation, but we're going to animate it at the same time. So if I jump back into here, and again, you can create this with students in advance, so they don't need to do the whole process of building the thing. And I'm going to start with my penguin in the start position, where I would start to draw the shape. 3 dots, animate, add action, and create path. And now I'm going to ask the students to do that letter formation for me. And then when I tap done, if they play that, then they're going to physically show me the letter formation, but they've actually done that with their finger at the same time as well. A little bit more playful because they're obviously also using the penguin, so P for penguin, you know, all of those connectivities that they have. But equally, from the teacher point of view, I could add in my audio recording here, asking them what I want them to do as well. So we're again supporting the resource. So I want you to be able to take the penguin and just show me the letter formation of how you would do the letter P. And again, apologies to you fantastic practitioners for my awful explanation of what I would ask the students to do. But what they're seeing here is they would get used to knowing that this is an instruction. So icons to help them understand that it's an instruction. Independently, they can tap on that. That's the teacher input. Again, going back to Lindsay's point before about that personal touch, I'm telling them what to do using the vocabulary that they're used to using. And then on their slide, when they play the slide, I would see them doing the letter formation. And if I was in light view table, which again is what Lindsay's perfectly shown lots of people before, I can see everybody's work here all at the same time as well. So hopefully that makes sense. And please do feel free to then have a go with that letter formation if you want to. It's a very simple way of kind of setting up a different activity for the students. And if you need me to recap anything about the creating of the templates as well. But like I said, it's just a shortcut really for you as a teacher. I could copy and paste each one of these, but again, I have to go through the whole process of tapping, copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. When you're in light view table, which is up here, or light table view, sorry, I just do it once and then just keep tapping duplicate, and it'll just keep making as many as I need to. So it's a really, really quick and easy way to do that. And you'll see that you can make endless amounts of these. So I'll leave people just have a play with that for a second in case any questions come up. And then there's just a last couple of things around exporting what you've done. We talked about creating movies, etc. So have a play, and any questions, like I said, about that, we can pick up.
I was going to ask, can you make the P change color? So when the penguin comes down, it becomes purple or whatever. So it comes down and it's leaving the track, the path in color.
So you could with some complex animation building into it. So yes, but it's not necessarily easy that an earlier students would do. So I would have to, if I jump into this, in fact, I've locked that on the slide. So if I just jump out a second, grab that shape, which is all I've done, by the way, is it's just enlarged the text onto the screen. If I just jump back to a blank slide, your process would be along these lines. So here's that letter in that color. I would have my penguin. If I just grab my penguin again, wherever he's gone. And now I've lost my slide again. Just grab this one again, sorry. What I would need to do is animate this color to change. So if I change that to purple and build it as an animation. So you're probably at the point now thinking that's far too much trouble, but do you know what? You challenged me, so I'm going to show you that it is possible to do. So that is going to, oops, actually I'm going to do it a slightly different way. I'm going to transition it through something called Magic Move, which basically makes it appear on the second screen. Okay, so see, I do like a challenge, but equally I'm thinking this is probably far too many steps that you've probably already switched off. So let me get rid of that. So what would happen now is that I would draw animation, oops, with this. Oh, he's already done it. And then when I play that, it should. Oh, he's dropping off. Then it changes color. So in short, yes, but probably not. I just quite like the thought of, I like a challenge, right? Can you do it? You would be able to find apps that would do that for you, but I think, and I'm sure Lindsay will back me up on this, the idea really with this is this app can do lots of things. So for your younger learners, once they know what the buttons are that they can do, they don't need to learn lots of different apps. If you then gave them like a phonics app, which probably would do that for you, they've got to also then learn how to use that phonics app as well as using this. So yeah, maybe I should have just said no.
So Imogen, what I would do is repeat the process that Matt has done for the letter P for all the letters of the alphabet and export each slide as a little video. And then those videos can be brought back into Keynote. So the video would sit over here and they could watch the letter formation, you know, as many times as they'd want to. And then they could have a whole selection of the letter P's to practice letter formation on their own, whether it's tracing or then having a go writing themselves. So the bulk of the work could be done ahead of time. And then you'd have sort of in an album on your iPad, this collection of 26 little letter formation videos that you can use again and again in different lessons or for different purposes.
Yeah, and that's kind of perfectly segued then into the last part, which is what do we do with some of this stuff? So this one, for example, just taking Lindsay's example there, if I've got this slide created, if I tap on the three dots, I can export this then either as a movie or just as an animated GIF. And actually an animated GIF is probably an easier one for you to use for this process. So if I tap on that now, I've got lots of slides on here because obviously this is part of my presentation. So I just need to make sure I'm selecting the animated GIF to be slide 55 to 55. And then when I go back and tap on export, it's going to create this as an animated GIF. Now, hopefully I've done this properly to be able to demonstrate this. There we go. You see it animated on the screen. I'm going to tap share and then save image. That's going to save it to my camera roll. And now if we imagine going to just a blank one where the penguin isn't in movement. I've copied all of these, haven't I? I'll just delete some of the stuff off I don't need to use. If I go to my plus and go to photos, here's that animated GIF, it's the last one that I've used. And now this is a video. So that can be in the top corner, exactly as Lindsay said, as an example for the students. You tap on that, that's going to show you what I'm asking you to do. And then this is your workspace where you get to create it for yourself. And you'll see that that just continually plays. So again, it's always on the screen, it's always going. Students can check back and check their understanding of what they're being asked to do. And then they have a go themselves over on this side. So again, reference, students' work, always there. And that works with any of these things. So you can export, you could export this as an image. So if the student has created, or use this one, sorry, if I want to export this as an image, just as an example, evidence their work, I can export that then as an image. For the ones where we were adding in the student voice, so this one here was my story, I might export that as a movie. So again, export and then choose movie. Again, just check that the slides that you're using are the right slides. So again, you probably wouldn't have as many slides as I've got on here because I've just been adding in multiple ones. But if I just choose that slide because that's the story I want to export, if I then go to export, that's just going to create that as a video, complete with my voiceover, complete with the animations that I've put into it. And then just take a couple of minutes to just create that. Now you use Seesaw, so you could from this point just share that directly to Seesaw if that was something that you wanted to do. So I don't know if I've got Seesaw on my device. I think I have. When this finishes creating, you'll see I have the options to share this to specific apps, of which Seesaw should be on here somewhere. No, maybe I have taken it off my device. It will be on your device here as an app to send it to, or just save the video. Again, that saves into my camera roll. If I go to my plus and the photos, there's the video that I've just created. So it's a couple of clicks. And then this is all collected as one, and I'll play it briefly.
One day the penguin went for a walk.
So then it's a video. So again, you've done that kind of, this is the animation page, but this is the final product. And it's a couple of taps to just export that, but it does capture the audio from the student, the movement from the student, the storytelling approaches that they might use as well. So hopefully that's answered a lot of those questions. I now have a slide deck full of the letter P. Any questions before we wrap up and bring things to a close? I appreciate that there's been a lot in there in terms of different uses, and it's definitely something that is have a play with. Even just take one idea and have a play with, and definitely share amongst yourselves, which I'm sure Lindsay sort of encourages people to do as well. I've shown you using a penguin to do this as just an example, but I'm sure lots of you have probably started to think about, oh, that will fit really, really nicely into this topic that we're doing, or a literacy activity that we're doing with some of the students, even numeracy activities where we're looking at recreating patterns, even down to computational thinking, where we mentioned at the very start about ordering things within the image gallery. Is that the correct order that things would go in? You could play around with that as well. So, but any questions from anybody, or you're just all busy making penguins dance around your screens at the moment?
I think this could be extremely helpful, especially for distance learning, so that if you're just sitting there creating something, like I know Imogen's going to go off now and animate all 26 letters of the alphabet for the weekend, and being able to save those as little videos and pop them into a shared album, linking through the iCloud with our managed Apple IDs, then, despite the fact that you're not there, you can still have access to the content that each other creates for activities or lessons you want to do with the children. So it just gives you more access to each other's creative potential.
Yeah, I think there's no better time at the moment than to start sharing what we create, right? Because we are all isolated in that respect, but probably all working on very similar kind of things, and one idea that someone spends some time creating can really help another member of staff. And when we I think about the well-being point of view of lots of this. The more we can share amongst ourselves, I think it's going to save people time and worry. But equally, the outcome for learners, hopefully, is that they have a different way to express themselves, which ultimately is my views on why technology makes a difference in the classroom. And you probably, of all the teachers I ever work with, are the ones that get that the most, right? Because you don't ask children to write things down all the time. That just happens later on in life, when as soon as you have the skill to write, apparently that's the only way you can communicate. So, but I won't get on my soapbox about that. I argue with fellow lecturers in university about that idea of, you know, let's not always ask them to write things down, because it's not the only way to share things. Any other questions from anyone?
I do have a question. I noticed that the voice recording, when you switch on to presentation mode, the button disappears.
Yeah, so it's built in as an animation. So if I just drop something onto this page very quickly, this is just a test of some audio. When I drop this in, if I go to that animate section, it actually automatically builds as an animated section. So it will automatically play when you tap the screen. So that's why it's not there as a tappable object, because it's fundamentally always set as tap. You can change that to be after a transition, but either way, it happens when the screen changes to something. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if that
put in a little icon and then put that on the background.
Yeah, and I'm making some resources at the moment for some schools, and actually we talk a lot about the iconography of building things. And if I go to this one here again, it's the familiarization that at first I might need to tell them that's I want you to add a photo in there, but over time, and this is probably where the consistency comes across the school, is that everybody uses a similar icon, which is what Lindsay kind of alluded to before, I guess, in terms of sharing resources. Because your learners will then get familiar with to know, that's where I add a video, that's where I add a picture, that's where I do a drawing, that's where there's some audio. So when you have that joined up approach of your iconography, in time, students will just see that and know what that relates to, that visual representation of what they're being asked to do at any given moment. Or choice, it could be that there's, you know, choices on a page for them to be able to demonstrate their learning. So
it is almost like learning another language at this point, like you said, and especially I think that's why I'm such a big pusher of Apple across early childhood into lower school, so that as your kids progress going up into first, second, third and fourth grade, they've got that similar language access already.
Yeah.
And that it becomes just second nature, where they don't have the use of the technology is not inhibiting them anymore. They've learned these skills and they've learned to recognize certain clues and icons, so that they know right away, oh, that's there, all right, I'm going to add a picture, right, that's there, I'm going to do a drawing here, and they can get on with showing what they know rather than just learning the tech.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's trying to make the tech as invisible as possible, so that the learning is at the key of what you're doing. Fantastic. I will just leave you with some shameless plugging. I have kind of put together some ideas around this. So I do have a YouTube channel which kind of lists lots of kind of opportunities for using different applications in different ways. They're more for my students in university that are practicing to become teachers, but there might be some things in there that just help you in the short term to think, I hadn't thought that would be a good idea. This one, for example, is how to do a fake FaceTime call. It's done in Keynote. So again, it's using Keynote for the same idea and using things like Instant Alpha. And I actually did it in a university session, teaching my students how to use Keynote. And in the video, what happens is my son actually introduces the lesson for me. I think I've actually got the example, which probably make more sense to show you. This one here. It's very, very simple and easy to do. I've literally just phoned myself on my device so that I get the front screen as if it looks like a FaceTime call, and you'll see that as it jumps up. Here we go. So that's what my screen looks like when someone phones me. It's just a picture, and then underneath it is the video of my son introducing my lesson. But I've kept the icons so that it looks like this, and I've just taken those two slides and put them in the middle of a presentation. It also has a sound bite to it. So there's hidden in the background, I think on this one. Yeah, there we go. You can see it. That's just a Spider-Man ringtone that I've added. That I think I created in GarageBand or something. And then what happens in the middle of my session is my phone rings. And all of my students look at the screen because they're like, oh, how embarrassing. And then I answer it, but I'm not really answering it because it's a pre-recorded video. And actually in this video, it's my son saying, hi, Dad, sorry to interrupt your lesson, but I've got a great idea for your students. And the engagement was through the roof. I did it as a bit of a joke because I thought it would be funny to do with my students. At the end of the lesson, so 2-hour lecture on how to teach science, all the students wanted to know was how to do that. And then on placement, they were all using it as an idea in their classrooms. And it was brilliant because the engagement went up. We talk about different ways to hook students. They'd got their grandparents to record videos to introduce lessons. Someone got their boyfriend to dress up as Father Christmas because they were doing placement around Christmas time. So Father Christmas came in and introduced the lesson. And it just changes that approach. So again, it's Keynote, but it's not Keynote as just that kind of linear use of it. It just changes what you can do. And again, you know, I did it and 19-year-old students were like, oh my God, that's brilliant. You can only imagine what 4 and 5-year-olds would be like. One, there's the funniness of your phone going off in a lesson because it's like, oh no, that shouldn't happen. But then you've got someone else introducing your lesson for you, which just brings a different aspect to things. And again, I'm sure you guys will be really playful with lots of those things. So again, there's a video in there that shows you how to do that, how to set that up. So
a lot of Matt's videos are also on our technology resource page. I have plugged a bunch of his as well for things like Keynote and Pages and Numbers. So yeah, you can find his YouTube channel through our Matt website.
There we go. So I've taken up a lot of your time anyway, and I'm sure you've got to de-stress for the next day. So just leaves me to say thank you so much for taking part today. Hopefully you've got lots of ideas. If you do want to ask anything further, Lindsay's got my contact details. More than happy to engage in any conversation with anyone. But yeah, thank you very much.
Before we all say goodbye and leave the screens, just a big thank you for your time and for how you plugged in, I think, exactly what people needed to know. And I think everybody can take a lot of bits and pieces out of it. And it'll be exciting to see some of the stuff being added to some of the things that you're doing. So thank you very much. I hope everybody agrees with me that this was quite helpful and it was quite spot on too. This was a request from the staff to have more knowledge about Keynote. So thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. And stay safe.
Bye, guys.
Bye.